Welcome to the session number 9. That is the final session of the module 3, talking about responsible innovations and development in Africa. And the topic of the final session of the part 1 is responsible innovation development in local communities in Africa. And here the specific focus on private sector and not-for-profit organizations, NGOs and international organizations. So the objectives of this session is to address the development of responsible innovations in local communities in Africa, to recognize the challenges and opportunities the private sector and the not-for-profit organizations have for responsible innovation development in different African contexts, and to know about a few examples of private sector and not-for-profit organizations that support innovations in Africa. And finally, there is also learning assessment with the study of the PPT slides and the book, and a quiz regarding the module 3. And let's start again with the main points. A repetition from many sessions that responsible innovations based on people's need, they are crucial for sustainable social, economic, and environmental development in Africa, and especially relevant in these decades when the population growth and urbanization are enormous and very rapid. It is very difficult to achieve responsible innovations and sustainable development in Africa without active participation of the private sector. So private sector is needed to achieve sustainable development, but it is also challenging how private sector then achieves and supports sustainable development. In Africa, various non-governmental organizations and intergovernmental organizations, especially United Nations SDGs, and the World Bank policies and projects, and the European Commission's new strategy with Africa, they are important frameworks for innovation development. And finally, an interesting detail is that the increasingly super-rich individuals and their philanthropic foundations, they are involved in innovation development in Africa, and they can have a huge impact on local sustainability in various African countries. So let's come still once more on this responsible innovations and what are they in local development. A responsible need-based innovation is a novel product, service, or business model that supports a sustainable and inclusive transformation in society, and it alleviates local, environmental, social, and/or economic challenges, in this case, in Africa. So it is a product, service, or business model facilitating transformation in society and elevating problems in environment, social, and economic aspects. In Africa, the key still is to support that such knowledge creation and innovation development is generated. So support knowledge creation and innovation development. So innovations emerging are responsible and they bring sustainability, sustainable well-being and prosperity across the continent, across populations, across local communities. And innovation policies and practices, they can support responsible innovations and their emergence. So Transformation innovation policy, then, as we discussed earlier, it supports the sustainable development. It supports the systems-wide transformation of society. And it supports the inclusiveness of local development. So we need this transformative aspect in innovation policy. So sometimes it can be incremental, a small local change, a small improvement of technology. In other cases, it can be a completely new, radically different product or service, but a simple economic growth is not enough. But to achieve such deeper transformation and innovations, inclusive innovations, there are required novel mindsets and practices that then finally lead into sustainable, inclusive societies and communities in Africa. And it's about cooperation, it's about networking, it's about co-design between various stakeholders, people, policymakers, private sector, not-for-profit organizations, and they all need to be involved in these transformative innovation policies. But let's go now to private sector very shortly. Everyone knows what is private sector, and it's still important to remember that the main principle of the private sector is to create economic profit. That's the role of private sector. It is run by individuals or enterprises for profit. But this profit generation nowadays, it needs to be adjusted to gain sustainable local communities. So even though there is this economic profit generation, it needs to be under sustainable development and responsible innovations. And private sector is really the main engine of economic growth and development in Global South and in innovation system. Without private sector, it's very difficult, if not impossible. Then, an issue is that from where these innovations come and what is the role of private sector in innovation generation. There are, of course, global innovations and multinational giants producing huge amount of technological innovations like Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, Google, and so on. So they provide a lot of technological innovation, but these innovations do not always address the needs of local communities. So in Africa, the particular attention should be on homegrown African companies that are closer to these local communities and their needs. Also in Africa, multinational corporations, they have brought several crucial innovations as discussed before, like M-Pesa, mobile money, and so on. So these have been important, but there is also room for different types of stakeholders and their innovations. They can emerge from international, small and medium-sized enterprises dealing with water purification or solar power, or local people and local startups providing digital services for local people, or local community in these living labs, just, transferring and modifying the activities from other communities and context to their context. So modifying the existing services and products for the benefit of local community in which they are located. And nowadays, the role of private sector is very important in knowledge-based society because they are the key actors to develop and commercialize innovations. And they often invest in R&D that is behind the development of many innovations. And they have an impact on local communities. And this technology development and technology-related entrepreneurship, that has become very evident in Africa as everywhere in the world. So local private sector, local enterprises, these are expected to drive Africa's social transformation and economic growth. And this is facilitated by the overwhelming access to ICT and increased access to internet and faster internet, mobile internet, and so on. So the context is getting very good for local technology-related enterprises. And it is hoped that these enterprises then unlock the Africans' economic growth and challenges. And so far, a lot of these activities are dealing with everyday life and leisure, but for economic profit. So more focus on business purposes could and need to be in the proper solutions. And underdevelopment and poverty can be also a business opportunity, and therefore it is not necessarily impossible for private sector to be engaged in proper solutions, because it can turn out to be business opportunity. However, sometimes these activities are targeted only entrepreneurial people, skilled people, and competitive individuals, and they are actually a minority of population in local communities in Africa and everywhere. So to whom these opportunities are created is an important issue to think about. So focusing on innovative products and services that are responsible, have a positive societal impact, and it can bring really business benefits and add value in economic profits. An enterprise, its reputational gains, its retention of skilled personnel, and it can lead into higher employee satisfaction. So innovative products and services that are responsible can bring many positive aspects for enterprises. And increasingly, the market and the consumers, they become more concerned and they are more interested to understand what is the products and what are the private companies' responsibilities in terms of the impacts of their products and services throughout the value chains and life cycles, from the raw material to the end user and recyclation. So from raw material to use and recycling, all these aspects need to be taken into account, and how responsible the enterprise is in all these aspects. And that can provide, a niche to the existing market in which the enterprises do not necessarily concern these aspects so completely. In Africa, many innovations are top-down products that are, for the highest strata of society. And, some innovations, then they address the poor, rather unethical ways, just attracting them to more consumption, or, for example, gaming industry, attracting them to use more of their money into gaming and so on. And sometimes private sector also produces wasted innovations that are technologically solid, but the communities do not take them because there are also similar other innovations available, and they prefer to use them. So instead of producing something new that can be used, they produce an alternative consumption good that do not find their place in the market. For example, purifying and filtering water, that is something that, it's not always successful, such innovation, because existing goods are there. Okay, when we move then from private sector to not-for-profit organizations, the mindset changes, because now economic profit is not anymore the target. However, these NGOs and IGOs, they are also engaged in the emergence of innovation. And sometimes NGOs can be also linking the consumers, the local inhabitants, and the private enterprises. So in that sense, it's not very clear always the boundary between NGOs and private sector and local people. They can be, a network together. And NGOs and IGOs such as World Bank, International Monetary Foundation, the United Nations, they have been always involved in development in Africa, as well as many philanthropic non-profit organizations. And as discussed or mentioned, the super rich individuals nowadays and transnational companies, they have become increasingly involved in very many kinds of development in Africa. And NGOs' role can be different. They can advocate and influence governments, or they can, enhance social, cultural, economic, or environmental sustainability. They can focus on welfare. They can focus on justice. Some NGOs, are more operational. They promote innovation that, help in these aspects. And other NGOs are very simple, small grassroots organizations on a voluntary basis, just engaging people together, ideas together, enhancing the everyday lives of people. Other NGOs are like, global organizations. In the end, they have strategies, they have hundreds of people, even sometimes thousands of people working for them. And they have become like, organizations, huge organizations. So what then NGOs can do in innovation development? They can help to translate external development, external knowledge into local context, and indigenous local knowledge in the interest of the outside world. So they can be kind of mediators. NGOs being long time present in local context, they understand locally embedded knowledge, and they know about local needs and concerns. And they can, sometimes assist private sector to develop their strategies to meet better the local needs. So in that sense, I mentioned that NGOs can be the facilitators or intermediators between, private sector and local people. And they can assist the private sector or corporations to fulfill their social obligations. For example, nowadays it's very important to have corporate social responsibility, and NGOs can help the sector to meet such a requirement. And therefore, the connections between businesses and NGOs is increasing. And in weak institutional contexts, the partnership with NGO is often essential to have access to local people and to secure that there is an advantage for this activity, that social risks are controlled, and the value is shared between different stakeholders. So the private intervention is not just top-down, but it's discussed between different stakeholders locally. And some, NGOs are truly global, like BRAC, that has been present for several decades, and it's assisting over 100 million people every year, and it's employing 100,000 people, and it also cooperates between, large private enterprises. Another non-profit organization that has become very big is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and they donate hundreds of millions of USD, even billions of USD for development in Africa. The Indigo Trust also provides small grants for projects to leverage, technologies to stimulate innovative approaches to accountability, transparency, and citizen empowerment. So there are various large NGOs, foundations, and trusts that are engaged in development and facilitating local development. And they have had substantial impact on innovation development. And obviously, international governmental organizations such as United Nations, UNECA, UNESCO, World Bank, the IMF, they have an influence on structural conditions and development-related policies made in Global South in African countries. And already mentioned and discussed the Sustainable Development Goals, and the number 9 innovation focused is very important. And UNECA, having more than 60 years in promoting the economic and social development of its African member states, so an important stakeholder in local development. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda and the African Union Agenda 2068, fostering innovations. The World Bank is a long-term actor present in Africa, and it has changed its policies over the decades from more like straightforward policies and macro-level structural adjustments to more supporting knowledge development, innovation technology, and entrepreneurship. So they are seen as the key building blocks of competitive and dynamic economies. So innovation, entrepreneurship ecosystems, they are seen as kind of instruments for better development. So innovation is a key word here in the World Bank strategies. That has several elements in detail how to do it in practice, and then in practice several programs turning into projects. And a recent framework comes from the European Commission, so how European Union and Africa can cooperate together. So in 2020 was published its strategy with Africa to foster cooperation between Europe and Africa. And what are the respective and mutual interests and responsibilities, and creating this kind of multiple networks between the EU and Africa. As the figure illustrates, a lot of organizations and structures in both continents and how they meet together in different programs and practices. And according to this EU-Africa strategy, innovation is a key to drive green transition. So it's about sustainability. Investment should be geared towards strengthening scientific capacities in Africa by providing access and local adaptation to technologies as supporting innovation financing mechanisms, so access and finance. Trade should facilitate the adoption of innovative and sustainable business models for a climate neutral future. So trade needs to be also climate neutral, innovative and sustainable. And digital transformation and entrepreneurship are also very relevant for innovation development. So digitalization and business orientation, entrepreneurship. And when we come into details of this strategy, there is various aspects mentioned, like developing green model, boosting education, research and innovation, maximizing the benefits of regional economic integration and trade, food security, combating climate change, sustainable energy and biodiversity, promoting peace and security, governing migration and mobility well, and then, engaging together on the global scene of strengthening the multilateral rules-based order, promoting values, human rights, democracy, rule of law, and gender equality. So it's about the broader values that EU and Africa would promote together. So conclusions. It is very difficult to achieve responsible innovations and sustainable development in Africa without the active participation of private sector. It is also very challenging. NGOs and intergovernmental organizations, they play a significant role in development for innovations in Africa. United Nations SDG, World Bank, the European Commission's strategy with Africa are key structural elements in it, and also the role of private super-rich individuals and their foundations, they have an important impact. There is an exercise to think about how universities, private sector and NGOs could be involved in the promotion of responsible innovations in Africa. What is the way to cooperate? And what are the ways to enhance the cooperation between universities, private sector and NGOs to solve in an innovative way a development challenge in your country? And checking through the previous slides and the book once again and doing the module quiz. And here are the references for this session number 9.